interview prep. There's kind of a lot to go over. I'm really going to focus mostly on the interview prep and kind of go over brief things about resume and cover letter because I kind of feel like a lot of that you can find just online, and maybe that's not my expertise. Um, but I'm happy to have you all here, and hopefully, I can help you all ease your concerns and maybe get feel more prepared for this whole finding a job situation. So yeah, just kind of an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today: resume, cover letter, kind of the basics of those. Then we're going to really dive into the interview. So, what do you do to prepare for an interview? What do you do during an interview? And then what do you do after an interview? So, there's actually a whole bunch of things to do for that. Feel free at any point to drop um, messages in the chat, raise your hand. Really, this workshop is for you. So, honestly, you should be asking your questions, and I want to make sure to get those answered. So, hopefully, we'll have a good portion of time at the end just to go over whatever you're concerned about. So I did kind of want to just give you an introduction of who I am and why I'm here. This is going to be a longer introduction because I want to go into kind of what happened during my career because I feel like it can be comforting, hopefully, and maybe insightful as well. So for school, maybe we'll take a little step back. So actually, in high school, right, I decided, parents ask you, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, oh, well, engineering sounds kind of cool. I always thought of how things worked, and maybe that'd be nice. I like Legos. This makes sense. Math is always my best subject. I'm not good at reading, so let's let's go with that. So I went into undergrad at UC Berkeley for civil engineering, and I quite honestly did okay. I was pretty much a straight B student, and feeling I got to a point where I was like, okay, one of these classes are gonna be a C. Which one's it gonna be? And talking to advisors about trying to figure out what we wanted to do, I had an idea that I wanted to work on buildings because that to me it was like, oh, that'd be cool to point to a building and say, oh yeah, I worked on that. Now I went to an advisor and they said, okay, to do that you need to go to grad school. If you don't, you're going to be unhappy with life. Verbatim, that's what they said. They said that my boss would be like, I would be smarter than my boss, etc., etc. So I'm going on this path to go to grad school. Um, Now, like I said, I had a 3.0 average. The minimum GPA to apply to UC schools was a 3.0. Um, so, of course, last minute, I'm thinking, oh, I need letters of recommendation too. So I go talk to some professors, try to butter them up, like go to office hours once, and then go again and ask for a letter of recommendation. And one of the professors told me straight up that I need to think of some other schools. I'm not going to get in with the GPA I have, and I don't have any experience. So that didn't feel good because I thought that they knew what they were talking about because they're a professor. Um, so I still applied to the schools I wanted to, and ultimately I did get into UC San Diego for their structural engineering program. Now, kind of my background before going to UC San Diego was Circle K. I worked at Tapioca Express just as a barista, not as a like manager or anything like that. And I did not have any internships. I could not get internships. In fact, I tried, um, in my mind, hard to get internships. Meaning, I went to career fairs and was trying to talk to people. Sophomore year, they didn't really care. Junior year, I was feeling okay, and they're like, "Oh, we're looking for seniors." Senior year, I go, "Oh, we're looking for grad students." So, okay, I guess I just won't get one this time. I'll go into a little more of why I did not do very well with that internship process search before, or in a little bit. So I got into UC San Diego, which was fantastic. Here's when I got my first internship, and it was in a geotechnical engineering internship. Now, this is very different than structural engineering. Um, they work together, but it's not at all what I wanted to do. My internship was literally going on like a mountain and scraping dirt off of it, and like driving the truck and moving soil samples here and there. Nothing I wanted to do, but it was an internship, so I took it. Um, now this is now I'm in grad school. I'm learning some new things, feeling like kind of okay with what I'm doing, and decided to go get my first job. So I apply to plenty of places, and I get lucky, and I get a job in San Francisco as a structural engineer. And I did this for 7 years. I got my professional engineering license, and I still have it, which certifies me to design buildings of certain caliber. And below here are some of the buildings I've worked on. One of them is the one on the right is UCSF at Mission Bay near the Warrior Stadium, and the other one is at CSU Monterey Bay. It's a humanities and social science building. So this was all really great, and I did this for 7 years. And last year, well, a little more than a year and a half ago, I realized I was not happy. Um, the technical aspect of my job was probably 80% of it, and I was finding that it was making me feel very insecure about what I know, what I'm doing. And I knew my strengths were in communication and talking with people. I had the most fun mentoring the newer engineers that came in on how they should be handling themselves, how they should be talking to people. And ultimately, I found myself very confused. I studied and took a structural engineering license test to get my next degree, and I did not pass. And I had to really think about what I wanted to do. So I actually went and got a career coach and decided I wanted to leave engineering behind. Despite going to grad school, despite putting all this time, I wanted to basically start over from scratch. And I can't tell you how happy I am that I did that. It was scary, and but it all for me worked out. So right now I'm a university recruiting coordinator. So what that means is at the base of my job, I schedule interviews for people to get jobs as a new grad or as an internship. But what I got lucky in is that my job, I actually get to run our internship program, and I get to basically plan social events for people, make sure they're having a good time, make sure people understand what they're supposed to be doing in their job, having a smooth transition. I feel very comfortable in my job. I know that this is a job that I'm utilizing my strengths in. So the reason why I kind of wanted to tell you all of this is because getting a job, finding a career is hard. And I very recently had to go back into the job search and figure out what I wanted to do and how I was going to get this job. So I hope you know that you're not locked into any position, major, career, or anything like that. You can always change, and I'm not the only case out there. So now let's go into some of the meat of probably why you're here, because you probably just didn't want to hear my life story. Um, so your resume, right? Like, what is this piece of paper, right? Um, you're submitting this to a bunch of people for them to get an impression of who you are. What are your skills and why they should be interested in interviewing you? Not even necessarily hiring you, just interested enough to want to talk to you. It is your first impression, and quite possibly your only impression, to be quite clear. It's important to be clear and concise, maximum one page. Like, I've also done a significant amount of resume review in my job, and I can tell you that we don't spend very much time. It's probably like 10 to 15 seconds unless there's something that really catches your eye. So you really want to make sure that it's neat and easy to read. There's a bunch of templates online, but some of them are not good. Um, I can show you all some a little later if I find them, but yeah, just like make sure it's telling the story that you want. This also varies depending on the job. Like if you're doing like a marketing job, maybe it's good to have your picture there. Maybe it's good to have some more design and art in there. But if you're doing something like engineering or maybe a very traditional job, it's probably best just to kind of keep it simple. It's always good to have certain lines in there and just make sure you're not doing like too many fonts. You really want to just to be able to look and people to know where where they're going to get their information they need. They're going to want to know, your school. They're going to want to know what your experiences is, and they're going to want to know a little bit about you. For instance, for me, I tend to look to see if they've been in Circle K, and I may push them forward just because of that, and then they can prove themselves later on. Um, Now, I'm not saying that half your resume should be your interests and everything extra you do, but it's good to have a little section at the bottom that's like a little more of, you know, who you are as a person, because you never know who's really going to be looking at your resume. Some just simple tips is checking your links. There was a previous workshop on your link on LinkedIn. You should have a link to your LinkedIn, and it should work. There's of the resumes I've looked through, probably like 10 to 15% of the links don't work. And I'm not going to put in the extra effort to find you. And I'm just going to move on. Because to me, that shows that you didn't put in the effort to at least check that everything was working. Adjusting your experience to the job that you're applying for is probably the most important thing. Now, this can be varied in different ways. So I'll kind of step through two portions of my life, right? When I was applying for my first internship, I only had working at Tapioca Express, right? That is just a boba shop and working with customers, right? You might not think that there's a lot that goes in there, but I really focused on communication and why that was important to whatever job that I was going to be applying to. I also really emphasized Circle K because I felt like this organization gave me a unique topic to talk about, not only because like, oh, I was able to attend workshops on public speaking, organization, et cetera, but things that basically the company wouldn't have to pay or teach you. So I tried to make sure it was very obvious of like, I what I've been doing on the side, both in my whatever job and also my extracurriculars, have taught me things that you don't need to teach me, that I'm proficient in and that I'm confident in. We'll go into a little bit of how to sell that a little later. But it's really about trying to focus on what's applicable in your experience. It might not be the best to say, oh, I've, I can make, you know, I can make milk tea really well. But, it's like you can handle high capacity demand in, a stressful situation. You can work with coworkers of varying, backgrounds. There's a whole bunch of other things that you can say, and it's just a matter of finding it. And I think that to help with this, really, it's almost easier to start outside of your resume and just listing out every single thing you've done in your job. You might be surprised, like if you try to fill like a whole page of what you've done, there's going to be really good things in there. I think a lot of times people don't give themselves enough credit for what they normally do. Jumping into cover letter. Now, cover letters have kind of changed over the years in terms of being necessary. I'm sure you've noticed if you've applied to jobs, most times they're optional. Um, I would say you should do them. To me, yes, I don't actually always read them, but it does give me a good impression that someone took at least a little more time to create a cover letter. Now, when I was first interviewing, I had a terrible experience with cover letters. I hated writing them, and I didn't really know what to do. Um, I made one, and it was a full page, and I felt pretty good about that. And I actually got chewed out during an interview. Um, I wasn't doing very well in this interview, might I add. So I did not prepare for it, and they were asking me technical questions about engineering. I didn't know the answer. Quite honestly, with preparing, I'm not sure I would have known the answer anyway. But this interviewer ended up getting in kind of a rant on why my training wasn't very good, and then he really teared into my cover letter. He was like, "It's too long. It doesn't tell me anything." Also, at this point, I'm just like, I just want to hang up the phone, bury my head in the sand, and not listen. For whatever reason, I was able to kind of pull myself together and just take in what he was saying. I already knew I was not getting this job. There was no reason why I would get this job. And at that point, there's really nothing you can lose. So I asked him what I should change about my cover letter. And he said, this is way too long. You need to make it shorter, and it shouldn't be just what your resume is telling me. This was a moment where I was then able to kind of sit down, think about what story do I want to tell, and how can I change this so it's more, appealing. So, like I said, recruiters or whoever's getting your resume and cover letter probably doesn't want to spend too much time on it. So it needs to be easy to read, and it really needs to get to the points. Now, when I think about cover letters, I think that they should really be about who you are as a person. It should be more why you want to be in this position, and possibly why you want to be, or more importantly, why you want to be part of the company. Um, this kind of goes into looking at job websites, seeing what their company values are, and really tying those into who you are. Now, I know you're going to be applying to a lot of jobs, and customizing a cover letter is tiring. So, you can kind of vary it up in terms of how hard you want to work on a cover letter, but I would say definitely get a really strong cover letter. And if you can just change the job name and the company name, then that's fine. I know that it's kind of hard to continue to change things over time, but I really think that everyone should have a cover letter. Sometimes people use cover letters to kind of clarify why, if they took time off of, or there was a big block of time where they weren't working, and like, oh, I need to explain this. I'm a little in between on this, and I think a lot of people are as well, just in terms of like how to write a perfect cover letter. Some people think that, oh, this is a good time to explain why you weren't doing that, but maybe it's a good time to just explain why you're prepared for the job. I think overall it's best not to share anything that might give you off like a negative vibe. It's more like you've been doing all of these things in a great way. Once again, if you could turn on your cameras, that'd be great. It's just fun to look at more people. Um, as a side note, so I manage my intern class, right? And we had a meet. I set up a meet and greet with our CEO, um, and it was some people were joining remotely, and someone didn't have their camera on, and he told me to kick them out. Um, so I had no choice but to listen to my CEO, and I had to kick them out. But that's not going to happen here. But if you're comfortable, I would love to see your faces. Um, so yeah, overall, cover letters, they're important and they deserve a little bit of attention, even if they're optional. Doing one, you're ultimately always trying to show that you're better than everyone else that applied to this job. And most people do not do cover letters. So if you do, it's just one extra thing to be like, they put in some extra effort. That's just a thought in my head. Now, I wanted to go into kind of a bit about what's going on behind the scenes in terms of recruiting, because it's not always really apparent. And I found this out on my own, on the side once I started working. But the main thing that I found is that there's not always a designated recruiting team. Now, I'm in a company where we do have a recruiting team. Our company is 1,800 people, so we have a recruiting team of 50. So there's people that their jobs are to look at resumes, to screen people, to do interviews, all of those things. My last job, there was not. There was one HR person, and civil engineers, structural engineers. They were the ones looking at resumes. They were the ones um, doing interviews on top of their jobs. So I had applied to first time I was applying to internships um, after undergrad. I applied to like 30, and I was like, good. This is great. I feel good. They're gonna love me. It's gonna be fine. Um, Radio silence, right? Just no responses at all. I had to really be convinced by my friend that I really needed to apply for more. Once I did apply for more, I did get a response, and I did get an interview, and I did get a job, even when I thought it was already at the end of internships. Like my first internship, I started halfway through summer, and I was like, there can't possibly be anything, but there is. So the reason I bring this up is because um, once I got my first job and I was applying to a bunch of places, I got responses from applications 6 months into my first job of like, hey, got your resume, are you still interested? And I'm like, I've been working for 6 months. Like, where were you a long time ago? So you really need to just keep applying constantly. And you can't just promise to sit back and think they're going to get back to me, because there's not always a designated team to get back to you. And they might not have good practices in terms of getting back to you when you are like, when you're rejected. Rejection is kind of part of this whole situation. There's a certain amount of luck. Now, this isn't intended to scare you, but it's more just reality of what I know. So for this summer, we had 13 internship positions. We also had 10,000 people apply for these positions. So when I say that you should be applying and that there is a certain amount of luck, yes, that's kind of the reality of it. Now, this is very different depending on whichever job market you're looking at. But the point being is, when you're really actively looking for a job, I would recommend you applying to like 10 places a day, because really you just want to get someone to look at your resume, and then you want someone to be interested in it. And you have to give yourself a chance. If you don't apply, then you're robbing yourself of the opportunity for other people to find you. So yeah, I mean, there is a certain amount of luck. Sometimes when I'm looking at resumes, I happen to just randomly start at page 8, and there you are, the first one on that page, and I'm going to look at you, right? Um, so this kind of helps also with not taking things too personally. Um, Naturally, when you're applying to a lot of jobs, there's going to be either rejections or people won't answer your resumes and your applications. It can be hard, but you got to just keep going because it's not always you. There's a lot of different factors that go into this in terms of, just like for instance, for my team, we were only allowed to hire 13 interns. You know, there's a whole bunch of other factors too, like recently someone that had accepted our offer decided that they no longer, or that they wanted to accept someone else's offer. So now there's a position open. There's a bunch of luck in terms of timing, in terms of just what's happening. So really, you just need to keep applying. I'm going to take a sip of water. Cool. Um, so now let's go into interviewing. I think I think interviewing is pretty scary. I'm sure you all are too, because why else would you be here? Um, Now, I know you probably hate to know this, but really, the tell me about yourself question is something you need to practice. Um, the best thing you can do is really just practice for your interviews and answering these questions that you feel like you know, but you might not really. Or saying it out loud is a little different. Tell me about yourself almost will always be asked. Now I know, now being where I am, is that a lot of interviewers sometimes when they're getting ready for your interview, they don't have any time to get ready for their interview. They're coming right off from another meeting, they're doing something else. So they're probably going to ask you to tell you about yourself while they're getting their stuff ready together. So it's really important to have your like 2 to 4 minute spiel of who you are. How do you want them to know you? What's important? It's never. I wouldn't really assume that they've read your resume, quite honestly. Um, you don't really want to go and like reading down your resume, but you should definitely highlight certain experiences. You should highlight what you've, what your experience is in, why you're passionate about the job that you're doing, and why you're excited about that company. The reason they ask, these other questions on, where do you see yourself in 1 to 5 years, is because they want to know that they're making an investment in someone who will bring their company up. You always kind of want to think about when you're answering these questions is that a company wants you to help them. They're kind of selfish in that way, but if you have that mindset, it'll help you answer the questions in a way that will make them think, wow, Austin is really gonna not only do the job, but help me do my job, or things like that. What are your strengths and weaknesses? This is something good in general in life, just to ask yourself. Um, particularly in a job, they're always going to ask you this. And your strengths, you should be able to really drive them down and really show why that's important and also why it's unique. Now, I'm not saying like super unique, but like why is it better for you? So, for instance, for me, when I was going into engineering, kind of stereotyping, but I knew engineers weren't all that social. I knew that from my colleagues in college that it was kind of hard to have a conversation with them sometimes. So I tried to make sure that, one, I felt good with my communication skills. I wanted to show them that not only was I confident in that, but I had training in it because of Circle K, that I was helping teaching other people for this and that, and how that helps me and puts me in a different position. Um, Weaknesses is always kind of weird. It's like how do you spin a weakness to be a strength kind of thing. Now, I would say you want to be honest, but not too honest. Another thing that my coworkers talk about is just kind of funny stories. So one thing is there is such a thing as too much information. When one of my coworkers was asking a candidate about their experience, they were like, "Oh yeah, so I had this internship. It was really great. It was my mom's company, and but we didn't need to know that. Obviously, we know that if it's a relative, that probably means you were given some sort of favoritism to get the job. But companies don't need to know that. For instance, for me, I was asked, "Oh, why did you do a geotechnical engineering internship? That's really interesting." I didn't say that was the only offer I got. I said that I was interested in seeing how different engineers worked with structural engineers. Was that true in a way when I was there? Yes. But, it's just a matter of rephrasing and thinking about really kind of what is going to put you in the best light. I know that oftentimes interviewing can feel a little fake, um, but it's always making sure that there is that element of truth in there, and that's what's really important because it's also pretty easy to tell when someone's lying, as sly as you all may think you are. Yeah. Um, I think almost the hardest question for people to answer is why do you want to join my company? People tend to not put in enough effort into understanding what the company does, but also what the company values. So, for instance, my company, we have company values that are on the website. There's like, we run hard, which I don't really love. It's like, yeah, you go up and above, up and beyond, and like things like that. But they're like on the website, and they're in our scorecard is how well did they represent this value? How well did they represent this value? Now, I'm not saying that you should go verbatim and be like, I represent going hard because, but you should have certain stories of why you link to these things. There's a whole bunch of different kind of scenarios where someone would ask like, um, tell me something that was particularly challenging for you, and kind of going beyond just saying it was challenging and I handled it, but it's like I enjoyed the thrill of it, or I enjoyed the result of it, and because of that went further. I'll go a little more into that in a little bit. Now, preparing for an interview is the thing that you have really the most control of, right? You can apply to as many positions as you want. That's one element of control. But once you have the interview, then you really need to kind of put the time into figuring out how are you going to be your best self here. Um, Practicing is so important. I I really understood the value of practicing when I was applying for my current job because I was applying into a career that I had not had any official capacity in, and it was nerve wracking, right? And I wanted to make sure I knew what I was saying. Also because I'm older, right? I had a career and I'm doing the switch. Um, we really need to prepare and do research on what kind of questions do people ask. Go on Glassdoor. Um, Side note about Glassdoor is often people that write on Glassdoor either love the companies or hate the companies. So you're not really getting a great picture of what things really are. It's oftentimes people that just want to complain and are willing to put in that kind of time. So, but they do have good information on there. So, practicing questions, practicing your personal questions, but also practicing, technical aspects and, do you need to know certain laws to do about things? Do you need to know certain equations? Do you need to know certain concepts? These are good things to ask people about. You can ask your TAs, your GSIs, graduate student instructors about their experience and try to get some insight. Um, Knowing your stories, I found was harder than I had thought. You can common question is like, oh, tell me a time where you were blamed for something, and it wasn't your fault, um, or tell me a time where you were overworked and how did you deal with that situation. Tell me a time where you really needed to be organized and what did you do. I think it's good just to on a Google Doc or whatever, just write down certain experiences that you know very well about that you want to share. Oftentimes for me, it was sharing about Circle K. It was sharing about, times when I was in a certain position and I had to deal with different board members. A time where I was scheduling an event and it went wrong. Um, the hard part about this is giving people enough background, but not too much. because you don't want to lose people, right? You want to be nice, clear, and concise. But for instance, when I talk about Circle K, I'm going to talk about it as this is a community service organization that focuses on building leaders and doing community service in the process. I'm not going to go into divisions, districts, our tenants, you know,
Oh,
unless it's
some of these are
necessary,
bad.
right?
I know, literally.
Uh, yeah, unless it's fully necessary. So, you have to really think about what's necessary, what's enough information for them to understand this is a community service organization and I'm working with a bunch of different people. What more do they need for your story for it to be useful? Um, Investigate. Now, you need to do your research on the company, and I would recommend at the very minimal 15 to 30 minutes of scrolling through the resume and scrolling through their website and figuring out who they are, what they're doing. Oftentimes, when you're getting an interview, they'll tell you who you're interviewing with as well. And it's good to go on LinkedIn, go on their go on their company website and figure out who they are, what they've worked on. It just gives you time to ask questions or figure out questions you want to ask. Double checking is always important. What time is it? Where's it going to be? What time zone is it specifically more nowadays? For instance, even though for me, I'm getting interns for San Francisco, we have people from India that are doing interviews. We have people from, all over the country that are interviewing. So it's important to figure out what is the time that I'm really doing it. And I need, what is the bus route? Is there going to be traffic? All sorts of other things. Checking your setup. Now, I was very unsure about how do people dress for interviews, right? For my last job, I went on their website and found out most people were wearing like collared shirts but not ties, so I emulated that. For my current job now, I'm at a startup, so wearing a tie would have been a big no-no. Like they would have been like, "You do not fit here. Like you don't know what you're getting yourself into, so just like you don't understand." Checking your setup also goes into making sure all your computer's plugged in, making sure your Wi-Fi is good, making sure you have hotspot ready in case your Wi-Fi goes out, all sorts of things. And now the bigger thing I think is preparing your questions. Now this is something that I think that everyone can kind of help each other on. So I wanted to kind of bring up this is a Mentimeter, so you can go to this website and type in this code and then share what questions you would ask interviewers. I think that this is kind of important, not only for me, like I don't think it's important that I'm just talking. I think you all can give each other a little bit more. So I'm curious to know what questions you would ask interviewers. Now, the reason I bring this up is because at my last company, the our CEO said at the end of the interview, if they did not ask any questions, he would throw their resume in the trash. Um, Asking questions shows that you're interested in the job, shows that you care, that you've been listening. So I'm curious on what you all think is good. What does a normal day in this position look like? Yes, this is a great question because I mean ultimately that's what you want to know, right? You want to know what you're going to be doing and you want to hear it from people that are doing it. So yes, I very much agree with how closely will I be working with other people? Yeah. Now this is a good question. Now I would rephrase this a little bit, only because it almost might sound like you're trying to avoid talking to people. Um, maybe you can be a little more detailed in terms of like, oh, how often I'm interested in like, the development team and the marketing team. Are there opportunities that I'll be able to work with them? That way, it shows that you're interested and you've done a little bit of research on how their organizational structure will be. Um, you can also bring into my strengths I know is communicating and working well with people, building a relationship, and I'm curious on how often I'm going to be able to utilize my strengths for you. um, Great. Other questions, other good things, throw them out there. While I'm waiting for some more, my favorite question that I found has had at least a good reaction from people has been, what makes you excited to go to work every day? This tended to work even better when it was like an older person, because I remember my first to get my last job, I had asked, so in kind of, I feel like I could have worded it a little better, but I was like, since I know you've been here for a while, once again, could have worded it better. But I was curious on, why, what makes you excited to go to work here at, for LSS or engineers every day? And I got a really good answer from that in terms of like, yeah, we get to work on different things, but I feel like it makes them think, and it also shows that you're interested in it for the long run. What benefits does your company offer? Yes, absolutely. Now, there is a certain place for this question. So you will be interviewing possibly with a bunch of different people. There's going to be someone that's a recruiter, there might be someone that's more technical, and there might be something everything in between. Really, the recruiter would be the best person to ask this question. Like if you were to ask an engineer this question, it might not be utilizing their time and your time to really get into technical things with them. But they also might not know the answers. And for your situation, for your job level, it might be different compared to what they're actually getting to. What are some milestones that interns should hit in their first week, month, and full program duration? Yes, I think this is great. I think this question really kind of highlights that you're looking to see how you're going to impress them and what they need you to do. So I think that's a great question that you can ask. What types of projects will my group be involved in? Yeah, that's really important to ask. It's good to see kind of what people are doing, what your work will be doing. Um, you can bring in what you're interested in as well. Now, remember before I mentioned there is a such thing as too much information. Now, my company does not do any artificial intelligence tech related things, but oftentimes people are like, "Oh, I'm really interested in artificial intelligence. Is there an opportunity for me to work on that?" If you would read our website, you would know that that's not really an option. And oftentimes we'll see that as they did not do their research and they don't know that that's not really a thing. Now you can preface that with, I know that your company doesn't do this, but are there any opportunities in the future to work on this? But just kind of be careful with that. What type of environment around the office? Yes, that's important because you want to kind of know what the culture is. How do people interact? Do they interact, after hours, things like that? So yeah, very important. Where do you see this company and your position in 5 years from now? Also very good. I think that ultimately this is showing that you're interested in where the company is going to go and that you want to be a part of that. Fantastic. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to continue on back to the presentation, and we can always come back. Um, okay, so now just general tips on when you're having your interview. Of course, be on time. Now, being on time means being early. There's nothing really worse than being late for an interview. I'm not saying be half an hour early, but you can be like in the area like 20 minutes early. It'll also help you decompress. Nothing is more stressful than waiting on the bus, hoping that no one pushes the button that is going to stop. Um, just be very cognizant of what is time. When you're looking up directions, try to look it up a week before on the same day and the same time. How is traffic really going to be? And also you have to think about there could be an accident at any time that could stop traffic, that can make it worse. So just try to have your bases covered. Be confident. Nerves are often hard to get over, but that's why practice is important. You need to know who you are in terms of what you're trying to sell, and then also why they should want to get to know you. My company always talks about it's our privilege to interview people. Now, not every company thinks that way, but it's important to think like, I'm trying to impress these people. I'm also trying to put my best foot forward. Being attentive. Now, listening and is hard sometimes, especially in interviews when you're trying to think about what am I going to say next? How am I going to answer what they just brought up? It's fine to have a notebook down. You can write down, certain things. And it's also perfectly acceptable to ask for a minute to think. I think that sometimes people rush into answering things, and that's not always great. Now, you shouldn't take like 5 minutes because that is kind of a long time for just silence. But taking some time to collect your thoughts and answer effectively is important, and you're more than allowed to do that. It'll show that you're not trying to rush into things, and it'll show that you're trying to be thoughtful. Asking questions, we already brought up that and why that's important. being concise once again in your stories that you're going to be creating, that you're going to be talking to people about to answer their questions. It needs to be concise because they could get lost. Being attentive is a two-way street. They also are trying to understand what you're telling them. And I remember in my interview, um, for this current job, I actually had a story that I had not thought of properly and was telling it in a very awkward way. And she had to stop me and be like, okay, hold on, this was my question. And we actually did that like twice where I still didn't answer the question. So, I could have been more attentive. I could have waited a little bit to collect my thoughts. And then I could have also prepared a little bit better in terms of what is my little spiel about this certain thing. Taking your time is important. Uh, Talking too fast, it's hard. I do it. I've probably been talking pretty fast right now in general. But just remember to let yourself think and breathe. Sometimes if you talk too fast and you're trying to memorize things and go through a whole spiel, you stumble on your words. If you get lost somewhere, it kind of falls apart. So just take time and let yourself breathe. Um, Going into more nitty gritty tips about interviews. Now, there's a great way of answering questions that I've found through asking my friends and just interviewing. Now, oftentimes I realize that people are not really just looking for an answer, they're looking for an answer and. So, what I think about is, tell me a time where you were stressed and how you dealt with that. Answer how you were stressed and answer how you made sure that you weren't going to be stressed in the future. Um, you know, what is a time where you were wrong? Here's where I was wrong, and here's what I did to make sure that other people wouldn't make the same mistake. I went and made sure that my board members, my committee, whatever, understood where I had made an error to make sure that they wouldn't make this a problem. I made sure it was documented in this certain way so it wouldn't happen again. Um, they want to know that not only were you able to handle a situation well, but you were able to help the situation not happen again. It just adds a little more to what you're saying. Um, Now, it's also good to just show that you're going to make their lives easier, right? By hiring me, I'm going to do my job and draw from all of my experiences to help you do your job. Um, you're going to show, why you're different, but also like, why are you passionate about this? And why is going the extra effort not going to be difficult? Now, for my current job, the current job description was scheduling interviews. Really not too difficult. I knew I wanted to be in the university space. I wanted to work with interns, new grads, because I had experience with that, not only being an advisor, but in my last job, I was, helping welcome our interns and things like that, and I enjoyed that. So I made sure to take time to mention that. I know that you have internships, I know that you have new grads joining, and I'm actively involved in that and want to help make your program better. I know that these programs can fail in these certain ways, and I want to help you be better. Um, so, don't be afraid to talk about what you're passionate about. In my first job interview, they didn't mention Circle K at all. Um, and when they asked if I had anything else, I brought Circle K up because it was important to me, and I knew that it was a big selling point for me. I knew that I had a lot of skills from it, and I knew that I had a lot of stories from it. And I made sure to bring it up like, hey, I want to just talk about a little bit about this community service organization that I've been really involved with during my entire undergraduate career. I just want to share, I've done these certain positions, I've learned this and that, and I've really enjoyed it, and will continue to do that. It shows it's important because it can kind of open conversation. It also shows who you are, and it's just a way to open the door to talking about what you want to talk about. Now, after the interview, it doesn't just end. You need to send a thank you email. It does matter. Now, you can send it to the entire recruiting team, you can send it to your interviewers. The important thing is that you send an email. So I notice this very much, and you never know if you just need one person to like you to really push you over to the next stage. So, like, I've noticed when people send me emails back saying, thank you for scheduling my interview. I really enjoyed interviewing with this person, this person. Um, it's not going to necessarily get you the job automatically, but it'll, all you're trying to do is leave a good impression. And if you can have one other person on your side, then that's something else. For instance, you don't know who's going to be in the debrief of like, okay, everyone, how did Amanda do in this thing? And then someone will mention, well, actually, also they, comparing these two candidates, this person went the extra mile to write a cover letter. This one, mentioned our values. This one emailed us back, mentioning what they learned and why they wanted to know more. In this extra email, you can also ask questions that you may have forgotten to ask them, and that's just to serve you, right? In terms of what you're going to be doing. It's good to connect with your interviewers on LinkedIn, mostly because ultimately you're trying to stay in their heads. So if you're sending an email, like, also you send an email, you can send it like the day after. You don't need to send it like immediately. But I like to think of it as kind of a strategy of like, okay, it's been a day. I'll email them. Oh, my name has popped again up again. They're gonna think about it. I'm gonna connect with them on LinkedIn the next day. Oh, look, there they are again. So, it's all a matter of trying to stay in people's minds, trying to remind them why you're a good candidate, and make sure that everyone's on your side. Um, it's also not gonna like not sending an email is not gonna break, your chances too, but I would very much recommend sending this email. I wanted to go into a little bit of my past mistakes because I think that a lot of people can learn from it. So in undergrad, I mentioned I didn't get any internships. I was applying to structural engineering internships. Little did I know, really only seniors kind of get that. Um, I should have been applying to construction. I should have been applying to civil engineering, geotechnical engineering, anything else except structural engineering. I was really pigeonholing myself in terms of not giving myself the opportunity to work at other things that are related that would help me get in the door. You really just needed that one opportunity. Like for instance, like if you're looking for like research to work on for like, I don't know, MCB or something like that, molecular cell biology. It can be any kind of research. As long as you have lab experience, that'll help you get the next job. That'll help you get the next position. I assumed that I applied enough, so I stopped applying. Obviously, that just limits your ability to get jobs. Not preparing my technical skills. Now, at the time, I was admittedly a little lazy and I didn't want to look up what I should be expecting in interviews. And I thought that, oh, maybe it would just be conversational, personal questions. I feel pretty confident with that. Um, it's good to ask your peers, ask your teacher's assistants, ask whoever you can to really get an idea of what's going into this. You want to be as prepared as you can. Not researching the company, they will know if you don't know what they do, who they are. Um, yeah. And I think the biggest mistake I think was just thinking I'm not good enough. I think that everyone has these thoughts on, you know, can I do this? Am I the right person? Am I just fooling them into thinking I'm okay? I think it's important to sit back, think about all of your experiences, everything that's led you to this spot, and realize that you've put in the work, you've put in the effort, and you are good enough. And maybe it's just that you don't fit with this company, but there's a company out there that's going to be there to not only foster you and to help you learn more, but also be an environment that you'll really grow. Now, important things that I did do well, particularly on this last portion only because I had a different mindset, was practicing. I practiced with friends, as awkward as that is because I knew that they were in the industry I wanted to get into, and I had trust in them that they would not lie to me and say I'm doing a good job. You can also, and I highly recommend practicing with your career center because that's what they're there for, and that's what your tuition's paying for. So if you're not using it, you're really kind of losing out. Understanding my past and who I am. Now, I made a huge career switch, and I still take all of what I did in that career with me. It's not a mistake. It's not something I regret. It's just something that happened that brought me here. And I think it's interesting to think about that and to realize who you are and why is that important to you, not to them, to you. It helps it make it easier for you to understand your strengths, your weaknesses, where you've gone, and what you've learned. Understanding what the job entails is very important. And also kind of thinking about what could the job be? For instance, for my current job, I knew I didn't want to just schedule interviews, but I wanted to also do these other things. I researched the company and took down lots of notes and practiced and understood. And then lastly, yeah, understanding my value. I think understanding kind of what I've gone through and just doing a really clear reflection on what I've done and why I'm doing this next step was very important. Now, a lot of times people are unsure on their careers. I'm gonna be the first to tell you that I wasn't sure for the whole kind of 7 years of my career, and like I'm kind of comfortable, but should I be? Do I want to do something else? And eventually, that kind of gave out. Now, let's go on to some questions because that's kind of what's important here. I'm gonna bring up the Mentimeter again if it allows me to change something. But feel free to just unmute if you would like. That's perfectly welcome. Um, but otherwise, we can just use the same Mentimeter, I believe, and um, post your questions there. So,
Uh,
how can I help you?
I have a question. Earlier you mentioned like, how the way you dress is like very dependent on like the culture of the company that you're applying for, right?
Mhm.
Like how do you kind of learn the rules of like or get a gauge of like that company
Yeah.
culture, if that makes sense?
So what I've done is in the past is I've done a deep dive on their website. Now, if they're a decent website, they'll have pictures of people. So, for instance, let's just go into um, let's just look up my company, for instance. So I think you all should be able to see this. So this is the company I work for, and let's just kind of scroll through. Maybe let's just go to careers or something and see if they have some nice pictures of showing like what's happening. Oh, look, there's a video. So if I go into this video and like let's just see, what are people wearing? Okay, cool. Just kind of casual work clothes. Maybe not even. Maybe just like this guy's wearing a V-neck. Cool. This guy didn't even iron his shirt. So it's like not to take yourself too seriously, but to still feel like pretty good. So that's what I did. And I think that there can also be just general um, research done in terms of your facility. I mean, your major and understanding that. I think most times you really don't need a suit. I would say probably only maybe law you would need that. Um, Maybe like doctor type things, but yeah. So that's what I would say. Andrew, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. I've never had a job and it's only been Circle K. How do I show off my smallest of experience? I feel like I barely had any. Now this is a place that a lot of people feel. Now, um, ultimately, you do want to have a resume where you are kind of filling the page. Now, I would say Circle K. There's a lot to say about Circle K. Even if you are a general member, there's a lot you can say in terms of being involved in committees, going to events, doing things like that. I would recommend for if you don't have any internship experience, and also in general, you should usually for each position or title have at least 3 to 4 bullet points. I've seen resumes where people were like, "Oh yeah, I had an internship at Facebook, internship at Google, and I coded." Um, I checked with my boss, and I was like, "I mean, these are good places, but they didn't say anything." They were like, "Yeah, just next." Um, so it's important to really kind of outline out what you've been doing, um, and ultimately, there are going to be places that are looking for people that have had experience, but there's going to also be places that haven't. And that's kind of where your research kind of comes into, is looking at what are these kind of companies usually looking for. If you don't have job experience, maybe don't go for the super big name kind of places, but you're really just trying to get your foot in the door for anything. So I do think that there is a quite a bit of things you can list about Circle K. um, in any kind of capacity, and it's really just kind of showing off, what do you think is important to that job, right? So is communication important? Then you can bring up, working in committees. You can bring up leading meetings. Um, is working with other people important? You can bring up, oh, I decided to chair a project, and I contacted the coordinator. I made sure that all of our attendees got there on time, safe, um, and yeah, I think there's a lot of things, and also, if you maybe don't have these things, it's a good time. It's a good time to start looking at these opportunities, like asking the club board, like, hey, like, can I like host a social event, and I want to try to get involved. Like going to committee meetings and trying to understand, like, what's happening, getting a good feel of things. Um, I completely understand this kind of sentiment, and I was there with you, and a lot of people are, and really just kind of need to think about what is the job you're applying for, and what kind of social skills or professional skills do they want to see, and then thinking about how you've been doing that in Circle K, because I think more than likely you have been. It's just a matter of really kind of writing it out. What is your opinion on adding? Oh, this is in the chat. Adding a photo on your resume. I think this can kind of go either way. Um, I feel like it shouldn't be too big at the very least. Um, there's only there's only been one picture that I've seen on resume where I just did not like it. It was like this. It was really this guy was looking really smug, and I was like, this should be a professional picture. Unless you're, once again, I feel like marketing is kind of its own side thing that you can kind of do anything you want with. Um, but in general, I would say if you have a professional picture, if it's no bigger than like a $50 on the on the page, then that's probably okay. But I also think that in general, it's probably fine not. It's definitely fine not to have one. What is considered an optimal or preferred? Also, wait, sorry, Austin, am I okay to keep going, or are we? Is it a hard stop at 9?
Oh, yeah, you can keep going, but I have something at 9:10.
Okay, okay, cool. So what is considered an optimal or preferred order of sections of your resume? Education, work experience, activities. Um, Quite honestly, I think that's a pretty great order. In terms of, the beginning really should just kind of have, especially if you're just coming out of college. Um, what your school is, what your major is, maybe relevant classes. Now, the important thing about relevant classes that I did wrong is, and other people do wrong, is they list the class number. That doesn't matter. You should be listing the class subject. So for me, it'd be like, structural analysis, dam design, bridge design, not CE 128. No matter what college you go to, if people, you might think, oh yeah, people are gonna know like UC Berkeley classes, it's gonna be fine. No, they don't care. It's actually rather confusing. So you should maybe be listing some topics, but really not too many. You want to be kind of specific in terms of what would be applicable to whichever company or job you're applying for. Work experience after that is important because that's ultimately what people are looking for when they're screening and scrolling through a resume is what have they worked on and what is their experience. And then your extracurricular activities would be at the end. Now, work experience, if you don't have any like jobs, Circle K can definitely go in there. Sometimes people write it as leadership, but also sometimes it is kind of work. So yeah, I think that already that order is pretty good. In the chat, if you have an option to submit like your LinkedIn resume or like a resume longer than a page, is it better just include all of your experiences to show like a variety, or to submit a smaller, more targeted resume? Um, for your resume, I think you should definitely have it just be a page. I think even like for me that I've worked out of college for 7 years, it should still pretty much be a page, even though there's a lot to say. It shows one that you're able to be concise, but also people don't often have the time to look for that at the other page. Your LinkedIn really is the space where you can put anything you want. I would say your LinkedIn should be like, if you're saying that your resume is 2 pages and what are you going to do, everything and more should be on your LinkedIn page. That's a place where there is no limit to write all of your achievements and things like that. But yeah, I definitely think it should be limited to a page. It's just kind of convention. Now, is 2 pages not great? No, it's fine, but you run the risk of people not seeing what's on the second page. That's really kind of the main thing. It's kind of like a test. When you don't see the back and it's like, oh no, like I failed. So just kind of think about that. And yeah, um, other. Oh yeah, so CV. Yeah, CV is different though. So in case you don't know, CV is like it's really intended to be more than one page. So that I would say definitely should be longer. And there will be certain companies um, depending on your field that ask for a CV, and those should feel free to be as long as they want. I know my partner, hers is like 7 pages or something like that. Yeah. What other questions are there? It's a scary world out there. Well, if there aren't any more questions, um, there, you can always email me. Um, I'm happy to also, look at your resume, give you my feedback. Um, really, we're all here to help. So feel free to shoot me any questions you may have, and I'm happy to give you my insight. Now, also, once again, I'm just one person, so what I said might not be, the work for every single place, but just trying to give you a little insight on what I think and how I got here. Cool. Well, thanks everyone. Austin, I think that's all. Um,
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Chris, for taking the time to come and really present on this essential workshop for digital professional development comments. And I really did learn a lot about how to best go about doing an interview. Because I'll be honest, for me, interviews are not my strong suit. And well, that concludes digital professional development conference. Everyone, thank you all so much for coming throughout the week, and have a nice evening.